From Davos 2022, windy day. Joining me now is GV Prasad of Dr.Reddy. Mr. Prasad, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us here on CNBC TV18 at Davos. Health continues to be expectedly so in light of the pandemic. One of the big themes, one of the big focus areas here in Davos. But what's your big takeaway from the conversations that are being had here in terms of how ready the world is to deal with future pandemics? You know, people are talking about putting together a pandemic treaty. Do you believe that these issues have traction, are gaining currency? Are we likely to see movement towards them?
Yeah, I think from nationalism, vaccine nationalism, I think we are moving away. I think there's a realization by most countries and most companies that unless all of us are safe, none of us are safe. And I'm seeing conversations around vaccine equity, increasing the pool of funding for vaccines in Africa, a whole lot of different initiatives. I think the realization that pandemic preparedness is global and is not limited to your own backyard or your own country, I think is out there for us to see. The other aspect I've seen is a tremendous focus on health, prevention, cure, funding, all of those, and access and affordability continue to be major topics of interest here today.
Absolutely, and big challenges to tackle as well, and especially for countries like ours. But you know, on the issue of vaccines, and you talked about the need for vaccine equity as well as access. We have a situation now where you have suppliers saying we have vaccine and we have no takers, and we're heading to expiry, and we may have to extinguish this stock.
So, I mean, it tells you about the fact that at this point in time, you have availability, but you're not being able to put that to good use.
Yes, I think part of the cooling off of the demand is the tremendous focus on primary vaccination that worked very well. A large section of the population had infections, so they had double protection. But boosters will continue to be important as the virus evolves, and hence we have to be on guard, look at developing newer vaccines, looking at how vaccine escape is happening with the virus, and we have to be on our guard. From a business perspective, yes, we all have stocks, some of them we may have to expire, and that's part of the game here.
Yes, I guess it's part of the risk that you took, and
Yes.
you took a risk with Sputnik.
Yes.
Given the geopolitical situation, as well as the fact that vaccine demand at this point in time seems to have been saturated, especially as far as India is concerned, and even on the export side, I mean, there aren't orders coming the way of companies, including yours. What do you do now with the arrangement that you have with RDIF or Sputnik?
See, first of all, I think the way we moved into vaccines was not with a motive to make it a very large business. It was an opportunity to help the country, and we took the plunge, we took the risk, fully knowing that some of this may or may not pan out. We still believe the Sputnik is a great vaccine. We are doing a trial for boosting people who have taken other vaccines so that the market for Sputnik could enlarge. And based on the results that we see, the clinical trial results that we see, we will approach the government and the regulator. And if that approves, that could be an opportunity for us.
But if that doesn't, because we've seen the government hasn't particularly been very liberal on the booster policy anyway. They're telling you what you can take or what you can't take, and at this point in time, it continues to be homologous.
Yes.
If that were not to happen, then what's the plan B?
The plan B would be to move on. I'm sure the government will be guided by the science and by the trial outcomes that we see. And if the trial results are good, I think there is an argument for getting a booster.
But others have made that argument as well, right? So,
but I don't know if they've all done the trial.
Okay.
So we are doing the trial, and we will be guided by the outcomes.
But what would moving on mean if
moving on means
you
moving
don't
on
get
to the
nod?
next challenge, looking at the evolution of the virus, what else we could do in terms of vaccination, therapeutics, and all of those. But having said that, I think in a way it's good that the disease has kind of waned, and we should be more grateful for that.
Absolutely,
without lack of demand for
without
the vaccine.
without a doubt, without a doubt. But I want to now address the other challenge that the world is faced with, and that is the current geopolitical risk and the war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is an important market for Dr.Reddy's, almost 9% of your total sales. What has happened since the war broke out? What's the impact?
So we have operations both in Ukraine and Russia. Of course, Ukraine being a smaller market, the business is smaller. In Russia, we haven't seen any impact of the war. The country functions. We are committed to patients, and we continue to supply, and we are going to supply the medicines as required by the market. And I don't see any adverse impact on the sales that we have there. Ukraine operations got a bit disrupted as Kyiv was under attack, but we are finding alternate ways of sending our medicines there. We are finding land routes, and we hope to continue to serve our patients in Ukraine as well as in Russia.
Okay. Let me address the US market with you as well, because that continues to be a market where pricing pressure is one of the key challenges for pharma companies to deal with. How much of that are you feeling today?
So the pricing pressure depends on the market and the products that you have. If you have products with high margins, when new competitors come in, it's bound to pricing pressure is bound to impact your outcomes. And the one way of countering that is to introduce new products at a greater pace, find products which only a few companies can do, and hence reduced price pressure. And the third one is to improve your market share, try to become more efficient, and these are the tools we have, and we're using all of them.
You know, talking about growth going forward now, what, in addition to the levers that you're already deploying at this point in time, and in light of the opportunities that you foresee across different segments, what will be the main thrust areas? What do you intend to prioritize?
So in the near term and in the medium term, we will continue to grow our generic business, our API business, and our services business, which is today a small component of our overall revenue. And the core business has to continue to grow, and we hope to grow at double digit, maintain our margins, and maintain our EBITDA at around 25% in that region, and continue to drive resource productivity so that our return on capital employed is around 25%. This is our core business. As we do this, we are investing in building the future. And the future could be many things. It could be our biosimilars business, which is still not achieved scale, and we hope to get to scale by opening up our markets in Europe and US. We are conducting many experiments in digital health and digital platforms. Today, they don't show up in our revenue line, but hopefully some of them will get traction. We also intend to focus a lot more on innovation with the new biology and our oncology pipeline in one of our subsidiaries. So over the medium term to long term, we'll start seeing revenue and profits from innovation.
So let me just get a sense of what the innovation pipeline could mean in terms of investments over the next few years, and by when do you actually start to see the revenues kick in a meaningful way?
That's a question I don't have a very precise answer, but directionally speaking, it will take at least another 5 years for them to have meaningful revenues. The R&D levels that we have currently will more or less remain at that level in terms of percentage of sales. The growth will fund some of that. Investments into new businesses, and we also taking in approaches by partnering aggressively to share the risk and rewards.
So will partnerships be the preferred route as you look at moving up the innovation pipeline, or could you also consider the M&A route?
Partnership would be a primary driver in the initial years, at least in the next 5 years. Beyond that, once we get traction, we will put some money into inorganic acquisitions also.
And you know, when you talk about the possibility of acquisitions, what would make strategic sense for you?
So today our acquisition, we are not a very acquisitive company, of course. We are really primarily an organic growth driven company, but we are acquiring companies to strengthen our presence in key markets like India. Our preference today is to put our capital in businesses which can sustain, and not commodity businesses which are susceptible to competitive pressures. And in the longer term, we will invest in innovation.
So as a CEO today, and you know, I was talking to
I'm no longer the CEO,
yes,
is the CEO.
Yes, that's right. Sorry, as a man who's steering the company through a difficult period, I was talking to the global CEO of IKEA, and he said, when we were in management school, etc., you would be asked to draw up theoretical risk maps. And he says, today, as I look at my dashboard, there's every possible risk that you can think of that we're dealing with. So let me ask you that question. As you look at your dashboard, what do you see today, besides the crazy wind that's currently
blowing us off our seats?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there is risk in every business at every time. And in every difficulty, there's opportunity. So if you see, we made money during COVID times selling COVID drugs and vaccines to some extent. In the geopolitical risk, I think we see some companies exiting these markets, which opens up some space for us to expand our markets. So I don't look at risk as an absolute thing. I think risk is part of business, and we will be prudent about taking risks. But in every difficult situation, there's opportunity for us.
So what are you most excited about in terms of the opportunities that you intend to focus on for the medium to long term?
Like I said, in the short to medium term, it will be the core business. In medium to long term, I'm really looking at oncology very strategically, because we have multiple levers there. Our biosimilars is oncology based. Our injectable business portfolio is largely oncology. We have a very exciting small subsidiary in Bangalore called Origin Discovery Technologies, which has a very deep expertise in immune oncology and a good pipeline to develop. So these are exciting things for us. But this all involve risk.
It all involves risk, and it involves time and patience and investment.
Absolutely.
And going back to our conversation that we have year after year on when Indian pharma is actually going to move up the innovation scale, and that ambition of being $130–140 billion industry. What's your, as you sit here in Davos, as you talk to global business leaders, as you look at what's happening within your company and within the industry as well, how do you feel?
I feel positive. I think if you asked me this question 10 years ago, we talked about generics. We've reached a leadership position in generics. And I'm talking to you today, 10 years from now, I'm sure we will be innovative companies also here. But innovation is not like it's a continuum between API from generics and then innovation. Innovation is a very different game. It involves deep investment in a small number of bets, as generics you are used to a large number of small bets. These are fundamentally different businesses, and I think as companies commit themselves to innovation, we will get there.
Well, we hope you get there. Thank you very much for stopping by on a very windy day in Davos, but appreciate your time, and we wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you.
Well, we will take a break here on CNBC TV 18. Come back with more conversation from Davos 2022. Stay with us.